Good morning, everyone, and welcome you all to this, the fifth event in our Challenge, Change and Opportunity series, where we're going to be looking at trends that we've seen across AIM-listed companies reporting. I'm Jenny Fulton, Chief Growth Officer here at Emperor. This morning, I'm joined by three of my colleagues from our Insights team here at Emperor, Rachel Crossley, Tim Markhew, and Oliver McMahon. I'm also delighted to have Yvonne Cantu, Director of Investor Relations and Corporate Development at Benchmark Holdings, who's going to be sharing a little of their reporting and ES journey with us this morning. I think it's really interesting to reflect back on what we've seen over the past 12 months. After a year of exciting growth in 2020, 2021 was a year everyone wanted to join the AIM party. 72 new companies joined the junior market last year, the most since 2014. And if you add to that some that moved from the main market and a number of reverse takeovers, it gives us a total of 87 new companies to AIM last year. And it's not hard to see why. Over the past 2 years, AIM performance has risen by 25%, far surpassing that of the FTSE 100 in the same time frame. 2021's IPOs raised 1.85 billion, averaging over 21 million per company, demonstrating that a diverse group of investors are ready to provide capital for exciting growth companies. But that said, more listings mean investors can also afford to be selective. With 844 companies now on AIM, ensuring you can reach the right audience with a long-term story that's fully developed and makes a compelling case is more important than ever. And if you add to this the macro and geopolitical developments, increasing expectations from stakeholders, new reporting requirements to contend with, it all leads to an increasing pressure on companies around how they communicate their story. So, to gain an understanding of really how AIM reporting has evolved over the past year, we reviewed a sample of 40 reports with year ends between June and December 2021. And this morning, we really want to take you through 4 of the trends that we've seen and share some insights and some best practice examples. So without further ado, let me hand you over to Rachel to kick us off. Rachel.
Thanks, Jenny. It will come as no surprise to hear that the first trend is around embracing the ESG challenge. ESG has been and remains at the top of the agenda for investors, stakeholders and companies alike, and there's a recognition of the importance for companies of demonstrating their priorities and their progress and providing high quality information, as this quote shows. So it's been really encouraging to see progress during the year on this issue. So AIM companies are stepping up, both in terms of their commitments around ESG and their communications in this area. In this year's sample, we saw 78% include an ESG strategy or approach which sets out clear focus areas for their activities. 30% have established a separate sustainability committee which provides senior executive board level accountability and oversight of ESG issues. And 55%, up from almost none last year, reference TCFD, the Task Force on Climate Related Financial Disclosures, ahead of the requirements coming in for AIM, large AIM companies next year. So what does good look like across the reports that we reviewed? Well, starting at the beginning, materiality is the bedrock of any ESG strategy and communications. And so identifying those material issues that matter for you as a business. And it's been really encouraging to see that the majority of our sample now identify those material issues. This example here from Numis clearly sets out the process they've used this year to identify those issues. And there's a matrix you can see here on the right, which sets out which issues they've identified in terms of their importance from an internal and an external perspective to the business. And this serves as the basis for their ESG framework. A clear ESG strategy or framework should set your priorities and tangible commitments going forward. Evidence of progress is also key, so proof points, case studies and examples. And this example from Advanced Medical Solutions clearly does that. They have an ESG framework which reports against their 4 focus areas with commitments and relevant metrics. And then further on, different spreads go into each of those areas in more detail. So here we see planet, where they talk about data and highlights of the year. Focus areas will vary from company to company, but it will come as no surprise, I'm sure, to learn that in addition to focus on diversity and inclusion, employee well-being, climate change has been a real focus area for the year and priority for a lot of companies. We've seen a lot going on around COP26 and the transition to net zero, and AIM companies are starting to focus on this area more in their reporting. As I mentioned, TCFD will come into force for large AIM companies from next year. Most companies are at the start of their journey in terms of their reporting and commitments around this area, but a good approach we've seen from a number of companies is setting out a clear roadmap with a plan. Where are they now and where are they going and how do they intend to get there, as these 2 examples show, and an overview of their initial steps in this process. Best practice reporters are going further. Here in this example from Strix, setting out their targets and commitments towards net zero going forward, and how they intend to get there, and then linking that through to their TCFD disclosure and reporting against those 4 elements of governance, strategy and metrics, and the risks and opportunities that climate change presents to the business and how they are managing and mitigating these risks across their activities. This year, we've also seen an increase in companies using external frameworks and standards. And external frameworks can help to add credibility to your reporting and support your strategy. A few minority report against SASB or the GRI, but for the most part this year, companies are choosing to use the SDGs or Sustainable Development Goals, as these examples show. To be meaningful, companies need to select the relevant goals for their business and state how they can are making or can contribute to these goals going forward, as this example from AFC Energy shows. ASOS goes further, showing the direct and indirect influence on their goals through their strategy and activities. And finally, from me in this section, ESG shouldn't be a siloed section standing in isolation, but it's about integrated thinking. And the best reporters have a joined up narrative that integrates sustainability issues across their communications and reporting, as these 3 examples show. ASOS integrates sustainability into their corporate strategy, while EMIS Group has a clear ESG summary aligned with their investment case, and Hotel Chocolat demonstrates its commitment to sustainability in its chief executive's statement.
Thanks, Rachel. So I'm going to be talking about embedding a sense of purpose, our second trend. As this quote shows, a clear sense of purpose is now synonymous with a company's ability to generate long-term value. This has been a key focus in reporting for the last couple of years, driven by increasing expectations from stakeholders. From customers to employees to investors, people want to know how you do business and why, as they look to work with companies that share their values and beliefs. We found that this need to demonstrate consideration of social purpose, stakeholder interests and value creation beyond the financial is driving more rounded reporting within AIM. We saw more purpose statements, more storytelling focused on explaining the role of purpose. We saw more stakeholders featured in reports, and we saw a big increase in the coverage of culture and values. In terms of purpose, we saw a range of approaches for how to present and expand on the subject. A number of companies included purpose-driven approach frameworks, like the one we can see from AlphaFX on the left, These allow you to explain the interconnections between purpose, vision, values, and strategy in a clear and concise way. For those wanting to say a bit more, we saw companies including full dedicated spreads to purpose. In this example from CareTech, the CEO has a statement which reiterates the importance of purpose to him and to the whole business. CareTech also launched a full purpose report this year, which we thought was interesting. Finally, as we can see in these examples from SMS, we saw purpose in action case study spreads. So companies going one step further to explain that, well, here is our purpose statement and here's what it meant during the year, with stories and quotes from stakeholders, etc. In terms of stakeholder storytelling, we saw that another way to demonstrate value creation beyond profit is to feature more stakeholders within the report in general. Examples like these engaging spreads from Clinigen that we can see spotlight what and how the business is delivering for partners, clients, and patients via different case studies and different methods of storytelling. We also saw a number of examples of companies giving more stakeholders a voice within the reporting. So beyond just the typical chairman, CEO, chief financial officer, we saw different members of the business given an opinion. EMIS Group here had a What ESG Means to Me feature. They featured different panels throughout their ESG section, allowing people from different parts of the business to explain how ESG is important within their area. In general, featuring quotes and stories from stakeholders, or simply spotlighting their strengths and abilities, as we see in these nice examples from keywords, can personalise reporting and can really give claims about purpose, culture and values, and value creation beyond the financial more credibility. In terms of culture and values, companies have long included a list of values within their reporting and have long talked about having a strong or unique culture within statements without going beyond what that means and explaining it in any further detail. But now we're seeing the best reporters are using stories, quotes and case studies to demonstrate what their culture and values actually means and how it was brought to life during the year. This elevates the discussion to a more strategic level and makes things more tangible and provable. These examples we can see from Alliance Pharma and Benchmark Holdings set the tone for their whole report by demonstrating a greater focus on how they're creating positive stakeholder incomes throughout the business. Finally, this example from CVS also sets the tone for their report by featuring a really bold thank you to employees within the first opening page of their report. I think that this really shows that they're considering a wider audience for their document rather than just the necessary focus on investors.
Thanks, Tim. Moving along to the trend of telling a long-term story, within their reporting networks, many AIM-listed companies are connecting their past, present, and future to articulate a narrative of success that is comprehensive, believable, and can be easily supported. Could we go to the next slide, please? Aligned with stakeholder demand, in addition to reporting on performance during the year, companies are providing a longer-term perspective by discussing relevant emerging issues such as climate change, employee attraction and retention, and resource scarcity. They're also setting out how they will respond to analyzed opportunities and threats. As suggested by the statistics provided on the right-hand side of the screen currently, our review found that, firstly, the number of companies, including market reviews, has increased again, with a significant rise in companies identifying future opportunities. Secondly, the quality of risk reporting has improved markedly. This has happened, though reporting on emerging risks remains weak. And lastly, forward-looking strategy coverage has also improved as companies commit to short-term actions. Let's now examine what this looks like, firstly through examining what looks good in market opportunities. We saw many companies striving to present a balanced view of their prospects, hoping to demonstrate that their business model and strategy were appropriate. Quite a few companies developed their market overview, better discussing the context they were operating in and developments, big and small, that could have a material impact. The best examples, striving to communicate an authentic and transparent representation, describe both future opportunities and challenges based on current trends, and articulated how they were responding. Alpha FX as seen on the left-hand side, their market overview effectively outlines target markets and their current key client base, giving an empirical articulation of their potential future growth. It also describes specific trends, both positive and negative, to the business, and explains how their response will dictate impact. Taking an alternative approach, Central Asia Metals on the right breaks down their market outlook across their main products. For each, they provide a clear overview of each's demand aspect, lists key opportunities and threats to their current position, and then summarize their ultimate perspective in a clearly signposted independent paragraph. In reaction to global challenges and volatility over the past few years, there's also been a discernible improvement in the quality of risk reporting among AIM-listed companies. A simple table of principal risks is no longer sufficient for investors and other stakeholders to evaluate resilience and long-term viability. Reporters have responded by including richer disclosures around risk management, culture, and appetite, with commentary describing changes to risk profile, including emerging risks and linking to strategy and KPIs. Perhaps indicative of a more balanced use of language around risk reporting, Breeden Group, as seen here, actually named their corresponding section Managing Our Risks and Opportunities, as well as a detailed discussion that touches upon many pertinent aspects about their approach to risk. They also include a tabular heat map, and this is readily digestible and includes more aspects than the chart formats more typically used previously. If I could go to the next slide, please. The importance of incorporating emerging risks is also being seen in risk tables themselves. Benchmark Holding, as seen here on the left, includes a dedicated section to these within their principal risks. As well as this, companies are also providing transparency about their future risk reporting plans. Renew Holdings, for example, outline plans to disclose more ESG risks as part of their future reporting on the TCFD recommendations. And finally, I'll talk on my last point about strategy and what does that look like currently. Strategy is often the thread tying together an annual report, building on purpose to show how a company plans to leverage its business model to deliver performance and ultimately achieve its vision. The best reporters are now molding this strategy section to be both forward and backward looking. Many companies are setting and reporting against forward-looking targets and objectives. Though the level of transparency within these disclosures varies, many set out specific intentions for the coming year, detailing exactly what they plan to do to achieve their ambitions. Pan-African Resources, as we can see here, sets out clear future objectives for each of their strategic priorities, and as seen on the right-hand side, identifies whether they have short, medium or long-term focuses. The final two examples that I'll show today, the first is ASOS. One thing I'll note is that they include a helpful reminder of their original strategic ambitions for the year, and this presented at the side what their progress has been allows a sort of open and transparent representation and approach. On the right-hand side, we have YouGov, which is a great example as well. Alongside presenting their intentions for the next financial year, they also showcase again their specific medium-term targets, once again creating a holistic long-term impression about their sort of strategic activities. And I'll pass on to Rachel to continue the presentation.
Thanks, Oliver. So on to our last theme that we've identified across these reports around communicating effectively with your stakeholders. And that's about making more of the reporting network, whether that be the website or other reports, additional channels and formats, to make more of that content in your annual report and bring it to life. And we've seen a real trend this year towards companies asking more, particularly around digital reporting, and thinking about how they can best communicate with a range of and connect with a range of stakeholders. 73% of the sample that we looked at are now embedding annual reporting content across the website for example, the business model or strategy or investment case spreads. And 45% are making use of more interactive features, in this case, video, on their website as well to tell their story. 30% now have a separate dedicated sustainability report, and that's up from only 18% last year. So what does this look like in terms of examples? Gamma Communications has an online annual report, and that provides a clear overview of activities and focus areas during the year. I'm not sure if you can see that moving, but it scrolls down and provides an overview of their business model, strategy, investment case, and has made great use of video through a series of interviews to bring that to life. It's joined up very clearly with their annual report content, so they cross-refer right from the beginning to their report and additional video content online, and throughout the pages they have QR codes which provide links. So ABCAM here, again, apologies if this one's not scrolling down, has a year in review section on their website, which provides an overview of their key highlights and achievements during the year, aligned with their annual report content. They also have a separate impact report, which we can see here on the right-hand side, which it focuses on their sustainability commitments and the impact that they have as a business, and talks about their progress and performance during the year. And finally, ASOS. Their annual report has a very top-level overview of their ESG sustainability performance and links very clearly to this separate Fashion with Integrity report, which again provides a detailed overview and insight into their commitments, performance, and examples of activities during the year around their sustainability reporting. And this is then complemented with online content, engaging and interactive content focused around their focus areas. Oh, this one's moving. And moving down and showing some of their KPIs, progress during the year around their 3 focus areas. Here we can see 2 of them, people and planet. Moving on to look at some video.
Thanks, Rachel. As Rachel outlined at the beginning, we found that more AIM companies are embracing video this year. What we like about video is that it's kind of direct and engaging nature, and the way that it can bring the story to life and convey complex information in a much faster way. We saw that the companies are using video to present information on a range of topics this year. This one that we can see on the screen currently from Nichols is a video expanding on their company values and culture. The next example from Hotel Chocolat is their Roots to Wrapper video, which explains the kind of complex way that they make their chocolate in a fun and a short way, which is information that's potentially difficult to get across on a static page of an annual report. And finally, Breeding Group had a whole series of videos on their website dedicated to days in their lives of their different employees, which really allow them to expand on the different roles and responsibilities that people have, and really helps to attract, hopefully, future employees.
As I mentioned in the introduction, we're absolutely delighted to introduce Yvonne Canto, Head of Investor Relations and Corporate Development at Benchmark Holdings. Yvonne, welcome, and thanks again for joining us this morning.
No, thank you.
So Benchmark Holdings, leading aqua biotechnology company who deliver products and solutions in genetics, advanced nutrition and health to aquaculture producers. So a super interesting company who are really helping to improve sustainability in fish farming. And Yvonne, today we've been talking about annual reports, and we've seen your reporting evolve quite a bit over the past couple of years. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes, and I'm going to focus on sustainability, because that has really, ESG and sustainability have helped us anchor the narrative for our company. Our mission as a company is to drive sustainability in aquaculture, so it really is at the core of what we do. I took over the sustainability effort 2 years ago, almost to the day, and I saw a real opportunity to take a step change, in how we communicate, how we substantiate what we say we do, and how do we incorporate, that new way of talking about our business into our annual report. So we really thought about the annual report as a great tool to communicate, as a foundational cornerstone of our corporate narrative with the help of Emperor. So I focused, my first task was to set firm foundations, both for our sustainability program, but therefore for our narrative to all external stakeholders. And the foundational steps that we took was first and foremost to create a good governance organization, good governance framework and organization, ensuring that there was enough focus from the board and senior management teams, as well as committed people across the organization to make it happen. So we created that, a committee, as Rachel alluded to. We were one of the companies that took a step in doing that. But beyond that, we created a steering committee, with senior people across functions and business areas in the organization. And beyond that, then we created a group of people, our environmental representatives across all of our 26 locations. And that ensured that, we would have an engine of change really, across the group. That was very important. My second task was to conduct a listening exercise. I realized that despite the fact that we had been pioneers in thinking about sustainability, we had really fallen behind. The world had moved very, very quickly, and as we all know, ESG and sustainability increasingly top of mind for many stakeholders. So, I took some time to listen and learn, and I have to say, it was quite a steep learning curve. My background, I spent 20 years in the city as a corporate finance advisor, as a nominated advisor. And so a lot of these, should come naturally to me, engaging with investors and, ESG and annual reports and all of that. And yet it was, one of the, steepest learning curves for me. Why was it steep? Because as I started to get into it and talk to rating agencies, talk to investors, try to understand the various standards and frameworks that were emerging at the time, I realized there was a lot of confusion. Everybody, around the world and in the investment community knew we had to do something, but everybody was trying to pitch in with a new framework, a new idea, a new concern. And for a little AIM company, that was creating a lot of noise. So I had to spend quite a bit of time kind of shutting out the noise and figuring out which of the frameworks, which of the standards, which of the, stakeholders we, really fit with our business, and bring together the internal perspective with the external perspective so that we could anchor, our program and our narrative on something that made sense for the business, that addressed our key stakeholders' interests and concerns, but that in itself had longevity, because I think as a little AIM company with little resources, you run the risk of, reacting to, the flavor of the day of investors' concerns or whatnot. So that was quite a bit exercise, but it was super important because then with confidence, I could go back to the board and say, for our business, these are the things that matter for our business. This is the framework or the standards that we can realistically commit to adopt, set out the journey. I think a point very well made earlier around TCFD was, I think companies are pausing, much more instead of reacting, recognizing that these are long-term exercises, and setting the journey forward. And on that basis of that listening exercise, anchoring the materiality assessment, then we were able to come up with a program that addressed, all of that. Now, then I realized that even though we had clarity on what we wanted to do, how we communicated, was a real challenge. We had some legacy language. We had some industry jargon. We had, as I said, these frameworks and acronyms for everything. And so how do we communicate? Again, how do we commit to a narrative that will have longevity, that is powerful with employees in 26 countries, some, working from, people doing very manual technical jobs, to scientists, to people, in our finance team, et cetera. And that was not easy. And again, I had spent 20 years writing press releases or, reports for clients, et cetera. So we worked with Emperor on what seemed like a very limited scope exercise, which was about sharpening our narrative around sustainability. And it was very, very effective, very, very efficient as well. And we ended up with, with a way to communicate. We said, we want to, our mission is to drive sustainability in aquaculture. What does that mean in practice? We want to be responsible operators. We want to be proactive industry leaders. And we want to have a real impact across the value chain. And it sounds so simple. It took some time to come up with that sharp narrative. But then that became the foundation for our sustainability hub in our website, because then suddenly, we had a way to present to the external world everything that we had been doing for the last, months, in terms of, as I said, creating our governance, our materiality assessment, speaking to stakeholders. So for me, having that sustainability hub, I saw sort of a question popping up earlier around, when should you think about putting a sustainability hub on your website? From my perspective, that should be a priority, and the earlier, the better, because more and more there, external parties looking at your company with that lens, and having a place where you can, on a continuous basis, add information, policies, et cetera, is so helpful. It acts as an internal catalyst, because when you tell your colleagues, in the legal team or, across the organization, that boring policy which you are writing, that's going to go on our website. Suddenly, people look at it in a different way. And so it's kind of a, like it's like an accountability buddy in a way for those that, choose to run with someone. It's an accountability buddy, because by committing to having that, to opening your house, opening your home on the ESG front, it gives it more stature and focus internally as well. So my recommendation is just go for it. It's very versatile, and what you develop for the website then becomes, social media content, and, both ways. So I am, I'm really proud of what we have achieved as an organization, in terms of, rising up to the challenge of ESG disclosure. I am humble at the same time, and, so at points overwhelmed, because, I mean, all of those, on the call who interface with investors, there's still a lot of demands and confusion and conflicting views, and it's not uncommon that I get.
Just in terms of those sort of like the challenges in those conversations with investors, what sort of things do you come up against that are kind of quite common and you have to tackle?
Yes, so I get requests in the form of very long lists on ESG metrics or ESG parameters, and sometimes, from the outside, I just realize the limited understanding of the business that some of the governance groups within our shareholders have. And it's normal, they have to be running, ESG assessments for their fund manager colleagues, on many companies across sectors. I mean, of course, how can I expect them to know the intricacies of, genetics in aquaculture? But that means that, it's quite time consuming. It's quite time consuming to address the questions, but more importantly, to enable them to develop an understanding on the business, why for this business, a metric may be less relevant, but actually they're not even asking you about water management when actually, water and the use of water as a resource is, is a key driver of your business. And initially, depending on the workload, and everybody on the call, I'm sure, wears various hats, because that's often the case when it comes to people responsible for communications or sustainability, sometimes my initial reaction was like, let's just field all those questions to my colleagues who are technical experts. And then I realized, actually, I need to invest in these relationships, and because it's hopefully the same person or the same team that's going to come up with follow-up questions. And so let's take the time to, because it's an increasing trend, more and more, as we know, fund managers are having dedicated ESG teams and developing relationships with them. And those teams, those individuals will become as well part of very valuable input going forward into your materiality assessments, into your reporting, and to your prioritization. So that was a challenge, just the amount and Another challenge has been deciphering, challenge/frustration, deciphering, engaging and responding to rating agencies. Mm-hmm. I saw a slide, I can't remember who prepared it, but it showed a correlation between credit rating agencies when it comes to a company. And, there's high correlation the way, an S&P or Moody's or whatever look at a corporate. When you run the same exercise for ESG ratings, it's all over the place. And so I think that sector is in evolution. It's very young. And so, but it is a frustration it's frustrating when you as a team and people on the call put a lot of effort to enhance your disclosure, and you're expecting to have a nice rating that reflects that. And then, it is disappointing. But again, I think being realistic when you communicate internally to your board members that that's the way it is, and being committed to incremental improvements, that's all you can do.
Yeah, and a lot of it is about handling those expectations both externally but also internally. And I think what's really interesting, I'm sure a lot of people can relate to this, is that importance of getting that narrative right, and that you invested that time up front to really understand what the issues are and think about the different audiences, because I think that was a really important point, again, which I'm sure a lot of people can relate to, that you can have a whole range of different types of employees who've got all different audiences, and so crafting the message in a way that is going to connect across all those points is important. But then actually that feeds into that process of what you're putting on the website, and even in those conversations with investors, because all of that story and narrative has really been thought through, taking consideration of those different audiences. So really, really interesting, some really great insights there, and really appreciate you sort of sharing that with us. And I'm sure there's going to be plenty of questions. So what we'd like to do now is just pause things there just a moment, and if we can go to the next slide, we'll come back to Yvonne in a moment. Lovely. And I thought it'd just be good just to quickly, we're going to open up the floor to questions, both for Yvonne and also to everyone that's spoken this morning. So please do just drop those in the chat, and we'll collate them and come back to them. I think it's just good just to kind of summarise on some of the things that have come through this morning. I think in a way, one of the key things that we can take away from this morning's session is it really is all about joining up the dots, embracing that ESG challenge. Just as Yvonne has talked about, as she's been working on that over the last few years, there are still companies that are still really far behind on this process. And so if you're not already, really it is that time to look at more of a formal approach to managing ESG matters, to embedding it across your organisation and communicating your plans and commitments to stakeholders. We've talked about the importance of demonstrating that sense of purpose and again embedding that across the business and how that can help to motivate existing and potential stakeholders and build lasting relationships and create value. We've also talked about the importance of showing that you are considering the long-term opportunities and challenges and clearly articulating how you're preparing and responding and getting that story across. And then finally, thinking about that reporting network, thinking about how you're communicating across channels. And again, Yvonne talked about the importance of the website, that as you're thinking about that narrative and that story, really making the use of your corporate website, having that up to date, making sure that different channels are consistent, thinking about different ways that you can share your reporting and some of the options available, embedding content across the site. So and I think with competition from more and more AIM companies, just communicating your narrative of clarity, consistency and credibility across all your channels is really vital to ensuring it reaches those audiences. So now we just want to pick up on some of the questions that have been coming through. I'm going to hand over to Tim just to kick us off.
Yeah, sure. So we've had a question in which is one of the main questions we get asked in general on this subject, as sustainability and ESG stories grow within the annual report, when is the right time to introduce a dedicated standalone sustainability report?
So Rachel, do you want to pick that one up?
Sure. Thanks, Jenny. So you'll find a bit more information on this in the white paper when it's published next week. But as Tim said, this is one of the most common questions we get asked. And there isn't a right or wrong answer here, but it's all about thinking about your audiences, as we've talked about, the different stakeholders. Who are you wanting to reach with this information and what's the best way to connect with them? And investors are often looking for very detailed information, want information on data, metrics, progress during the year performance. So if you have a lot of information that detracts from the annual report narrative, a separate report can work well to keep that information in one place where investors can access it easily, or it might be that a short summary report would serve well for employees or customers, for example, or it might be that a reporting hub on the website, as Yvonne mentioned, is the best way and serves for everyone to focus on and get an overview of what you're doing in your activities. It's all about that joined up approach. So having not just repeating information or duplicating because you feel you should have it on the report or the website, but thinking how your information all works together and thinking about your audience and how best to communicate with them.
Great, yeah. Thanks, Rachel. And I think another question here actually on risk management. I know, Ollie, you were talking about sort of what we're seeing in risk management reporting. The question was, how can we report it more meaningfully on risk reporting? I don't know if Ollie or any of the others would like to just pick that one up as well.
Yeah, I'm happy to take that. I think what we're seeing, and obviously this is sort of trickling down from sort of the main market reporting processes, is that, whereas in prior years there's been a main focus on getting the principal risk tables right, we're seeing more companies trying to making the section meaningful by having sort of elongated discussions about their approach. So I think from the onset, companies really need to think carefully about what their approach is, what their actual appetite is, and how that can be understood by stakeholders, relative to other companies, not just in sort of isolation, being quite specific and relative about it. They also need to, have a better articulation and go into the details about their materiality assessment. What is that process? What does it look like? What are the responsibilities, and how does that play into and tie in with, the broader company? It shouldn't always be in silo, but should be, quite explanatory about how everything sort of, connects up. One of the things I was also thinking about when I saw that question was that I think that many AIM companies need to also think about emerging issues. I think this is something that we're seeing a lot more taking place, like how that is being incorporated within the process, and how that, year on year sort of transition is really taken credit to. I've also seen a variety of companies over the last year also put paragraphs or sections within their sort of discussion talking about main issues that occurred over the year. So, I've seen a few companies talk specifically in detail, apart from their principal risk tables, about emerging risks, so about Ukraine or about sort of Brexit or about the pandemic, and taking a point to sort of build a narrative around that and telling how it impacts upon the sort of leadership and sort of their relationship with risk.
Brilliant, thanks, Oliver. And Oliver's very passionate about risk. So actually, if you want to talk to somebody about evolving your risk reporting, he is the man to speak to. Justine asked about the white paper we mentioned, and just to say, all the sort of research and work that's gone in reviewing AIM reports over the past few weeks by the team is accumulating in a white paper, where actually we shared some of the examples today, some of the findings, but in a lot more detail with a lot more examples that we will be releasing in the next couple of weeks, and so we will make sure that comes out to everyone who's on the session. We've also recorded the session today, so that will be available as well, if you want to go back and have a look, or pass it on to any colleagues at all. But before we wrap things up, any final questions? And you're fine to come off mute and shout and get involved in the conversation. I will take that as a no. So may I just finish by thanking Yvonne once again. That was particularly interesting, I think, just to hear on that journey, on some of those insights of what she's seen along the way. But thanks to Oliver, Rachel and Tim as well. And
Jenny, could I just give a plug for our other events just before we wrap up? We also, in addition to the white paper coming out next week, we have a couple of roundtables on TCFD and climate strategies, and we'll be joined by one of our partners from Top Tier Impact, as well as Thomas and Mary Claire from the FRC. So if you're interested in learning more about TCFD and evolving climate strategies, please do join us for those there on Monday and Wednesday next week. Get in touch with the team and we can give you more information.
Yeah, thanks, Rach. We'd love to see you there. And also, any other questions that you have after the session, please do just get in touch. If there's any areas that we've touched on today that you think actually that's something we'd like to know more about, just drop us a line and we'd love to talk more. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining, and we'll hope to see you next week.